my baby girl. Just hold on. Papa will get money for your formula, okay, Layla?
Why is that handsome standing outside in this heavy snow with that baby?
She was worth millions, and he had nothing but a crying baby in his arms. When the wealthy fashion mogul offered him money, she expected gratitude. Instead, he shocked everyone by refusing. "Please," he said quietly, holding his child closer. "Just buy baby formula." That single sentence shattered everything she believed about poverty, dignity, and sacrifice. Days later, she went back to find him, but he had vanished. And when she finally discovered the truth, she realized he had been risking his life every night not for himself, but for the child sleeping in his arms. Before we begin, if you believe true strength isn't found in wealth, but in sacrifice, take a moment to subscribe. Like this video to support powerful stories that matter. And as you watch, tell us in the comments, what would you have done in her place? Long ago, though it was not really long ago, only in a city too busy to notice quiet pain, there lived a woman named Lydia Mo. People knew her name before they knew her face. They called her the Queen of Fashion. They said her hands could turn cloth into gold. That night, her name floated through the air like perfume. Inside a grand hall filled with light, music beat like a fast heart. Models walked slowly across a shining stage, their dresses flowing like water. Cameras flashed again and again, white light, sharp light freezing beauty in a single breath. "Lydia, look this way. Over here, smile for us." Lydia Mo stood at the center of it all. She wore a long black gown, simple but powerful. Diamonds rested on her neck, but her face showed no joy. Her lips held a small, polite smile, the kind that costs nothing. A woman beside her raised a glass of champagne. To another successful show, she said. Lydia lifted her own glass. "To perfection." She replied. They drank. People clapped. Music rose higher. Yet behind Lydia's eyes, something was closed. She had learned long ago not to feel too much. Feelings made people weak, and weakness had no place in her world. "Did you see the final dress?" a designer asked eagerly. "It will break records." Another said. Lydia nodded. "It already has," she said calmly. Applause followed her wherever she walked, but outside the bright hall, the night told a different story. The lights faded into shadows. The music disappeared. The cold wind whispered instead. Just outside a luxury mall where glass doors reflected wealth and comfort sat a young man on the hard pavement. His name was Elias. He leaned against the wall, pulling his torn jacket tight around himself. In his arms was a small baby, crying softly. The child was wrapped in old cloth, thin and worn, barely strong enough to fight the cold. "Shh," Elias whispered, rocking gently. "It's all right, my little one. Papa is here," the baby cried louder. Elias looked down at the tiny face. The child's lips trembled. Hunger spoke louder than comfort. "I know," he said softly, his voice tired but kind. "I know you're hungry." People walked past him without looking. High heels clicked on the ground. Expensive shoes stepped carefully around him, as though poverty could stain them. Some glanced once, then turned away. Elias lowered his head, not in shame but in patience. Inside the hall, Lydia laughed politely at a joke she did not find funny. Outside, Elias kissed his baby's forehead. "Just a little longer," he whispered. "Just hold on for me." The glass doors of the mall opened. Light spilled onto the pavement. And for the first time that night, their two worlds stood only a few steps apart. Lydia Mo stepped out of the mall with sharp, angry footsteps. The glass doors closed behind her, cutting off the loud voices of the boardroom. Her meeting had been long and bitter. Men in fine suits had argued numbers, markets, and power, trying to bend her decisions. She had listened in silence, then ended the meeting with one cold sentence. The brand does not beg, she had said. It leads. No one argued after that. Still, the tension clung to her like smoke as she walked into the night air. The wind was colder outside. It rushed through the open space in front of the mall, lifting loose papers and brushing against expensive coats. Lydia pulled her shawl closer, annoyed by the cold, and signaled for her driver. As she waited, her eyes moved without thought, and that was when she saw him. A young man sat close to the wall, his back bent slightly forward. In his arms was a baby. The wind pushed hard against them, but the man turned his body, using his own back as a shield. He tucked the child closer into his chest, wrapping the thin cloth tighter. The baby cried, weak and tired, the sound small but sharp in the quiet night. "Shh, please," the man whispered. "Papa is here. Papa is here." Lydia stopped walking. She did not know why. She had seen beggars before, many times, too many times, usually. She walked past without slowing down. Tonight should have been the same. But something about the way the man leaned into the wind, the way his hand trembled as he rubbed the baby's back, held her feet in place. A woman passing by muttered, "So sad," and kept moving. Lydia felt a sudden tightness in her chest. She reached into her purse without looking at him. Her fingers touched crisp bills. She pulled them out and stepped closer, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Here," she said, her voice firm, practiced. She held the money out. "Take this." She did not look at his face. She already knew what would come next. White eyes, fast thanks, maybe tears, gratitude. It always came with money, but it did not come. There was silence. The baby cried again, slowly. Lydia looked up. The man was staring at the money and her hand, then at her face. His eyes were dark, tired, but steady. He did not reach for the cash. Instead, he shook his head once. "No," he said calmly. The word hit her harder than shouting would have. "I'm sorry," Lydia said, thinking she had not heard him well. "I can't take that," he replied. His voice was quiet, respectful, but strong. "Thank you, madam. But I don't need money." People nearby slowed down. A guard at the mall entrance turned his head. A couple stopped walking. Lydia felt heat rise to her face. "You're refusing help?" she asked, her tone sharp now. The man adjusted the baby in his arms. "I'm refusing cash," he said. Then, after a short pause, he added, "If you truly want to help, please buy baby formula and diapers." That is all. The world seemed to stop. The wind kept blowing, but the people did not move. Eyes turned toward them. Lydia felt every stare like a needle. "You want me to shop?" she asked. He nodded once. "Yes, madam. My child is hungry. Money can wait." "Hunger cannot." The baby let out another soft cry, as if agreeing. Lydia's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer ready. Her heart beat faster, not from anger but from something she could not name. Embarrassment washed over her, followed by confusion. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever refused her money, for a moment. She wanted to turn away, to walk back into her warm car and forget this strange encounter. But when she looked into the man's eyes again, she felt it, that quiet strength, that deep sadness, that dignity that did not beg. Something inside her shifted. "All right," she said at last. Her voice softer. "I'll buy the formula." The man's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," he said, and this time the words carried weight. As Lydia turned back toward the mall, she felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She told herself it was nothing. Just another act of kindness. Yet even as she walked, she knew she was wrong. Because those eyes, those tired, steady eyes, had already followed her into the light, and she could not shake the feeling that she would see them again, even if she never did. Lydia pushed the shopping cart through the wide, bright store, its wheels humming softly against the clean floor. The lights above were white and strong, nothing like the cold darkness outside. Shelves stood tall and full, heavy with choices. For Lydia, this place was familiar. She had walked through stores like this her whole life, never counting, never doubting. Tonight, though, her steps were slower. Behind her walked Elias. He kept a careful distance, as though the space itself belonged to her and not to him. The baby slept now, wrapped against his chest, small fingers curled into his shirt. Elias moved gently, every step measured, afraid to wake the child or disturb the strange calm of the store. "You can come closer," Lydia said without turning. "The cart won't bite." Elias gave a small, polite smile and stepped forward. "Thank you, madam." They reached the baby aisle. Long rows of formula tins stared back at them like soldiers in shining armor. Lydia stopped the cart and looked at him. "Which one?" she asked. Elias studied the shelves closely. He did not rush. He bent slightly, reading the labels, his lips moving quietly as his eyes followed the words. After a moment, he reached out and picked one tin. "This one," he said. "It's gentle on the stomach." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "Yes," he replied calmly. "Some babies cry more with the cheaper blends. This has fewer additives." She watched him place the tin in the cart, carefully, as though it were made of glass. He did not reach for another. "That's all?" Lydia asked. "For now," he said. "One tin will last a few days if I measure properly." She nodded slowly and pushed the cart forward. They stopped at diapers. Again, Elias read the packages, comparing sizes and thickness. He chose one pack, the smallest. "These absorb better at night," he explained quietly. "I'll change her less, so she sleeps longer." Lydia felt something tighten in her chest. "You think about everything," she said. Elias shrugged. "Slightly, I have to." She reached for a larger pack and dropped it into the cart. "Take more," she said. "Babies grow fast." He shook his head at once. "That's too much." "Too much for who?" Lydia asked. "For someone else who may need it more," he replied. She paused, her hand still resting on the cart. She had never heard anyone refuse abundance so gently. Without arguing, she pushed on. They passed shelves of baby bottles, wipes, soft blankets. Lydia picked up a pack of wipes and placed them in the cart. Elias opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't ask for, I know," she said, cutting him off, but not unkindly. "This is my choice." He hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." They turned into the clothing section. Small jackets hung neatly, soft and warm. Lydia stopped suddenly and reached for a thick baby coat. "She needs this," she said firmly. Elias stepped forward, his voice low. "Madam, please, that's not necessary." "Necessary or not?" Lydia replied. "It's cold." He looked down at the sleeping baby, then back at the coat. His fingers brushed the fabric, soft and unsure. "She already has something," he said quietly, though they both knew it was not true. Lydia placed the coat in the cart anyway. "It's for her," she said. "Not for you." Elias swallowed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded. "If it's only for the baby," he said softly. Then, "Yes." As they moved again, Lydia noticed how he spoke. His words were simple, but careful. He did not beg. He did not rush. He asked questions about ingredients, about fabric warmth, about size and use. He knew the brands by name, remembered which ones failed easily and which ones lasted longer. "You've done this before," Lydia said. He gave a faint smile. "Parenting doesn't ask if you're ready," he said. "It only asks if you're willing to learn." She looked at him then, truly looked. His clothes were worn, his shoes thin, but his posture was straight. His voice carried no bitterness, only restraint, as though he was holding back a deeper story. At the checkout, Lydia added one more small blanket. Elias noticed and shook his head. "That's enough," he said gently. "Really?" Lydia met his eyes. "Sometimes," she replied. "Enough is not measured by money." He studied her face, then slowly smiled. "Perhaps," he said, "but dignity is." The cashier watched them in silence as the items passed through. Lydia paid without a word. Elias thanked her again, but not loudly, not desperately, just once, and in that moment, as the cart emptied and the bags were filled, Lydia understood something she had never learned in all her years of wealth. Some people carry nothing in their pockets, yet hold everything in their hearts. At the edge of the store, just before the doors opened to the cold night again, the baby began to cry. It was a thin sound at first, like a small bird calling for help. Then it grew louder. The baby's tiny face twisted, eyes still closed, mouth opening wide in hunger and discomfort. Elias stopped walking at once. "Easy, easy," he whispered, rocking gently. "We're done now. We're going." But the baby cried harder, her little hands pushing weakly against his chest. Lydia stood there, holding one of the shopping bags. She felt the sound travel straight into her chest. She had heard babies cry before at airports, at shows, and passing, but never this close. "Never like this." "She's cold," Lydia said softly. Elias nodded. "She doesn't like sudden changes." Without thinking, Lydia stepped closer. "May I?" she asked, her hands already lifting. Elias hesitated. For a moment, his body stiffened, as if the world had taught him to protect what little he had. Then he looked at the baby's face again and slowly loosened his hold. "Yes," he said quietly. "Support her head." Lydia took the baby into her arms. The child was lighter than she expected, warm despite the thin cloth. The crying slowed almost at once, turning into soft, broken sounds. Lydia adjusted her hold, unsure, awkward. The baby's head rested against her shoulder. "There," Elias murmured. "She likes that," as if she understood his voice. The baby sighed. Her crying stopped completely. One tiny hand curled around Lydia's finger. Lydia froze. The world seemed to soften around her. The noise of the store faded. The bright lights dimmed in her mind. There was only the small weight in her arms, the quiet breath against her neck. She stopped, Lydia whispered, as though afraid to break the moment. Elias smiled, a real smile this time, tired but full. "She knows when someone means no harm," he said. Lydia felt something spread through her chest, slow, gentle, warm. It was not pride. It was not power. It was something she had no name for. Her eyes stung slightly, and she looked away quickly. After a moment, Elias gently took the baby back, wrapping her carefully in the new coat. The child slept on, peaceful now. "Thank you," he said. His voice was steady. "For everything." Lydia nodded. "You're welcome." He did not ask who she was. He did not ask where she lived, or if he would see her again. He only bowed his head slightly, once, in respect. "I wish you well," he said. "And your child," Lydia replied. Elias turned and walked away, his steps quick but quiet. He did not look back. He moved past the lights, past the glass, and into the dark street beyond. Within seconds, he was gone, swallowed by the night. Lydia followed him outside, the bags now empty in her hands. The parking lot was wide and silent. Cars passed in the distance. The wind returned, colder than before. She stood there alone. The warmth she had felt faded slowly, leaving behind something hollow and heavy. Her chest ached in a way she did not understand. She looked down at her empty arms, then toward the street where the young father had disappeared. For the first time in many years, Lydia Moe felt disturbed not by loss, not by failure, but by a quiet truth she could not escape. She had everything, and yet something important had just walked away. One quiet evening, as the sun lowered itself behind tall buildings, Lydia Moe sat alone in her office. The room was wide and calm, filled with awards, photographs, and framed letters of thanks. Gold words shone from the walls for your generosity, for your kindness, for your support. She rose slowly and walked along the wall, reading them as if for the first time. "You've helped thousands," she said aloud. Her voice echoed back at her, hollow. She stopped before a large photograph. It showed her smiling as she handed a check to a charity director. People had clapped that day. Cameras had flashed. She remembered how light she had felt walking away. "So why," she whispered now, "does this feel so heavy?" She closed her eyes, and Elias' face appeared again. Not smiling. Not begging. Just calm. The way he had said no. The way he had asked only for what his child needed. "That man didn't want my money," she said softly. "He wanted dignity." The truth settled slowly, like dust after a storm. All her donations had been easy, safe, distant. This one had not been. This one had stepped too close to her heart. "I need to see him again," she said suddenly. The decision felt sharp and clear. The next morning, Lydia drove herself to the mall. No assistants. No driver. Just her and the road. The mall looked the same: bright glass, tall doors, people moving in and out with bags and laughter. Her heart beat faster as she stepped out of the car. She scanned the pavement. Nothing. She walked closer to the wall where he had sat. The ground was empty. Clean. Cold. "Excuse me," she said to a vendor nearby. "There was a man here with a baby." The vendor shook his head. "Haven't seen him." She moved quickly now, stopping guards, cleaners, shop workers. "A young father," she explained. "He sat outside with an infant." A cleaner frowned. "Not for days." Lydia's chest tightened. She approached the security desk. "I'm looking for someone," she said. "He stayed here last week." The guard checked a log, then looked up. "Oh, that one. You remember him?" "Yes." The guard said slowly. "He disappeared days ago." Lydia felt the words land like stones. "Disappeared," she repeated. The guard shrugged. "He was here one night, then he wasn't. Happens all the time." Lydia stepped back, the noise of the mall fading around her. The place where Elias had sat was empty, too empty. For the first time, fear slipped into her heart, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Some stories do not end where you left them." Days passed, one after another, like pages turning without meaning. Lydia Moe stepped back into her glamorous life the way a queen returns to her throne. Yet the throne no longer felt steady beneath her. The first morning, her driver opened the car door and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. Moe." She nodded without looking at him. As the car moved through the city, billboards with her face stared back at her. Beautiful, powerful, perfect. She should have felt proud. Instead, her chest felt tight. At the studio, assistants rushed toward her. "Your fitting is ready. The press is waiting. The investors arrived early." Lydia stopped walking. "Too many voices," she said. The assistants froze. I said cancel the fitting, she added sharply, and tell the press I'm unavailable. One assistant swallowed. But they flew in just to I said cancel, Lydia snapped. Silence followed her as she walked away. Inside the fitting room, silk dresses hung neatly. Glowing under soft lights, a designer smiled nervously. This piece will redefine the season, he said. The fabric alone cost. Stop, Lydia said. He blinked. Stop. What talking? She replied. I don't care about the cost. The room went quiet. Someone coughed. Lydia stared at a white dress on a mannequin. Her mind drifted without permission. She saw torn cloth. She heard a baby cry. She heard a calm voice say, I don't need money. Her hands curled into fists. Take it away, she said suddenly. The designer frowned. But this is your signature line. Take it away, she repeated. They obeyed. Later, during lunch, her assistant placed a tray before her. Chef prepared your favorite. Lydia looked down at the food and pushed it aside. I'm not hungry. You didn't eat yesterday either, the assistant said carefully. Lydia's voice rose. Must you count everything I don't do? I was only. Leave. The assistant left quickly, blinking back tears. Lydia sat alone, staring at the empty table. In her mind, another image rose, Elias standing straight, refusing cash with quiet pride. No anger, no begging, just a simple request. Baby formula, diapers. Why would you refuse? She whispered. That night, she lay awake in her wide bed. The sheets were soft. The room was warm. Yet sleep would not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt a small weight on her shoulder. She heard fragile breathing, light and uneven. She sat up suddenly. This is foolish, she said aloud to the dark. I helped him, but her heart answered back with silence. The next day, during a board meeting, voices rose on the table. Profits. Expansion. Luxury markets. Lydia listened, then spoke without warning. Do any of you know how much baby formula costs? She asked. The room froze. A man cleared his throat. I'm not sure how that's relevant. Lydia leaned back slowly. Neither am I, she said, yet I can't stop thinking about it. No one spoke. She stood. Meeting adjourned. As she walked out, she remembered the baby's breathing again, soft, weak, trusting. She remembered Elias' eyes, steady even in hunger. Inside her, two worlds began to fight. One said, you owe him nothing. The other whispered, you owe yourself the truth. And the louder the glamorous world became around her, the more clearly she heard the quiet voice she could not forget. Lydia did not stop when the sun went down. She pulled her coat tighter and kept walking, even when the streets grew quieter and the lights thinner. The city changed its face at night. The bright shops closed their eyes, and narrow places opened their mouths. She had never walked here before. Not really. Tonight, she walked like someone searching for a lost child of her own. The first shelter smelled of soup and old blankets. A line stretched outside the door. Lydia joined it, ignoring the looks that followed her clean coat and polished shoes. When she reached the desk, a tired woman barely lifted her head. Name, the woman asked. I'm not here for a bed, Lydia said gently. I'm looking for someone. The woman sighed, already bored. We're full. He's a young father, Lydia continued. He carries his baby everywhere. He stayed outside the luxury mall last week. The woman finally looked up. Her eyes scanned Lydia's face, slow and careful. We see dozens like that, she said, every day. But did you see him? Lydia asked. The woman shook her head. If he came, he didn't stay. Lydia stepped aside and waited. She watched men and women enter with tired faces, some holding children, some holding nothing at all. She asked a volunteer near the door, a man with a baby. The volunteer repeated, "That's dangerous. Most shelters don't allow infants overnight." "Where would he go then?" Lydia asked. The volunteer shrugged. "Anywhere he can hide." Lydia thanked her and left. At the soup kitchen, steam rose into the cold air as people lined up with bowls. Lydia stood near the entrance, her voice growing hoarse from repeating the same words. "I'm looking for a young father," she said. Double quotes tall. Quiet. Dark eyes. A man laughed softly. "You just described half the street." Another shook his head. "Babies don't last long out here," he muttered. "What does that mean?" Lydia asked. He looked away. "It means the city doesn't care." She moved on. In alleyways, shadows shifted as she passed. Some people ignored her completely. Others stared. "Why do you care?" one man asked suspiciously. "I just do," Lydia replied. A woman pointed down a dark street. "Try there." Lydia followed it, only to find nothing but trash and silence. When she turned back, the woman was gone. Her feet ached. Her hands trembled. Still, she kept going. Finally, near an abandoned building, she saw an old homeless woman sitting on a crate, wrapped in many layers. Her hair was gray, her eyes sharp and knowing. She watched Lydia approach without surprise. "You've been asking all night," the woman said. "Yes," Lydia replied. "Have you seen him? A man with a baby," the woman said slowly. "Yes." For a moment, Lydia's heart jumped. "Where did he go?" The woman's face darkened. "Men like him don't stay visible for long." Lydia frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman leaned forward, her voice low. "The city hides them. Or breaks them. Or both." A cold fear settled in Lydia's chest. She looked around at the dark streets, suddenly aware of how small one man and one child could be in a place like this. "Please," Lydia said quietly. "I need to find him." The old woman studied her for a long time, then shook her head. "If you find him," she said, "it won't be where the lights are." Lydia thanked her and walked on, fear and determination twisting together inside her. For the first time, she understood how easily a person could vanish, how the city could swallow a life without ever noticing. Lydia's search stretched into days that smelled of smoke and wet stone. Every night, she returned to the streets, her coat now thin and worn, her shoes scuffed. Her hands raw from holding so many doors that never led to him. The city seemed to close down. Her, dark and silent, whispering secrets she was only beginning to understand. She asked every face she could find. Shopkeepers shook their heads. Street vendors shrugged. Other men and women on the pavement muttered, avoided her, or laughed quietly to themselves, as if it were funny that a woman like her, in dresses and diamonds, should chase someone so invisible. Then, one evening, she heard something that made her stop in the middle of a narrow lane. "Did you hear?" a man said to another, leaning against a brick wall, his eyes darting around. "The night workers are back." "What do you mean?" the other replied. "The factories are closed." "Closed? Ha! No one's watching them. They climb scaffolds, carry steel, break the rules, and nobody registers them. Not the city, not the government, not anyone. They say they risk death," the first man said softly, "for cash, and sometimes they disappear." Lydia's heart skipped. She moved closer, though she did not belong here, and listened. "Who goes there?" the first man snapped. Noticing her, just passing, Lydia said, "I'm looking for someone. A man with a child." The men exchanged a glance. The first one spat on the ground. You won't find him where the light is, he said. If he works at night, he's hidden. And hidden people, they vanish fast. Lydia nodded, her chest tight. I need to find him, please. Anything, any clue. The man hesitated, then lowered his voice. You could try the old factories near the river. The abandoned ones. That's where some of them go. Risking their lives while everyone sleeps. She repeated the words slowly to herself. Risking their lives while everyone sleeps. That night, she walked toward the edge of the city, past streets she didn't recognize, past empty warehouses with rusted doors and broken windows. The wind cut through her coat like knives, and every step echoed off the silent walls. Finally, she arrived at a district that smelled of old metal and oil. Buildings leaned against the night, windows shattered, walls covered in soot. No cars passed. No neon lights shone. Only the shadows moved, long and thin, dancing as if alive. Lydia paused at the edge of the street. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, he could be here. Or gone. And if he's here, it might not be safe. She stepped forward anyway, the sound of her heels almost lost against the emptiness. Each step brought her closer to a place where few dared to go, where men risked their lives for pennies, where the night itself hid the unseen, somewhere in the distance. She thought she heard a faint sound, a shuffle, a whisper, the soft scrape of metal. Her heart pounded. She knew she was close, yet every shadow seemed to hide both promise and danger. And then she stopped, frozen. Ahead, the buildings leaned like giants over empty streets, silent, dark, and waiting. Somewhere in this abandoned district, she thought. He waits, or works, or hides, and if I'm not careful, I may never find him at all. Lydia moved slowly through the abandoned district, her coat wrapped tight, her breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. The darkness pressed in from all sides, broken only by the faint flicker of a distant lamp. Its light dancing over cracked windows and rusted metal. She had to be careful. Every step could be heard, every sound could scare them away. And yet, she could not stop. Something pulled her forward, an invisible thread tied to a man she did not fully know, and a child she could not forget. From behind a shattered wall, she peered into the yard of an old factory. Shadows moved, shapes climbed. She squinted, trying to make sense of what she saw. Then she noticed them, men, dozens of them, scaling tall, wobbly scaffolding that leaned like it might fall at any moment. They carried heavy steel beams and rusted crates. Each step was careful, but dangerous. Some had only gloves, no helmets, no harnesses. Their faces were grim, eyes fixed, bodies trembling from the effort. Lydia gasped softly. One slip, one wrong move, and they would fall into the darkness below. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the wall she hid behind. They risk everything for what? She whispered to herself. A low murmur ran through the workers. Faster. Get it done, someone shouted. The inspector comes soon. The words made Lydia freeze. Inspector. These men were invisible, unregistered, unprotected. Every single one of them worked at night, unseen, unheard, and uncounted. Then, as her eyes adjusted to the shadows, she saw him. Her heart nearly stopped. It was Elias. He was climbing the scaffolding with a large, heavy beam balanced across his shoulders. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with grime and dirt. His shirt was torn, revealing bruises on his arms. A cut on his forehead had dried with blood, streaked in dark red down to his temple. His hands shook, but he moved carefully, almost mechanically. Up the rickety scaffolding. Elias, she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. He did not hear her. He was focused, his eyes fixed on the top, on the heavy load. His muscles strained with every step. He looked so small against the enormous structure, yet so unyielding. Another worker glanced at him and called a name she did not recognize. "Watch out, Marco." "Don't drop it." Lydia's stomach twisted. Marco. That was not his real name. He was hiding, working under a fake identity. Hiding himself to survive, hiding himself to protect his child. She noticed the fear in his movements, but also the discipline. He moved with knowledge and care. He knew the risk of every beam, every foothold. And yet, he did it anyway. One man slipped. A crate fell with a loud clang, and others shouted. Elias steadied himself, barely faltering, and kept climbing. Her chest ached with fear. "He's risking his life," she murmured. "For money, for survival." She thought of the baby, fragile and warm, sleeping somewhere safe. This man, this father, would do anything for her. He had refused her money because it was not enough. Because he needed to protect his dignity while ensuring his child's life. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she could not move. She could not call out. One false step, and she might ruin everything. She had finally found him, and yet, she had never been closer to danger in her life. And in that moment, standing in the shadows, watching him climb, blood and sweat on his skin, Lydia understood something she had never known before. Bravery was not always loud. Sometimes it was silent. Sometimes it was unseen. And sometimes it was the only thing between life and death. Her hands shook. "Elias," she whispered again, I have to help you." But he continued, unaware of her, carrying the weight not just of steel, but of every choice he had made for his child, for survival, and for dignity. And Lydia knew then, with a clarity that both terrified and moved her, that the story she had been chasing had only just begun. The night hung heavier now, as if the darkness itself had grown restless. Lydia stayed behind the crumbling wall, her breath shallow, her heart beating so loudly she was sure Elias could hear it even from across the yard. The scaffolding trembled with the weight of men and steel, the sound of their movements echoing through the empty industrial district like low thunder. Then it happened. A sudden crack, sharp and loud, tore through the night. One of the workers slipped. His foot caught nothing solid, and for a terrifying moment, he hung in the air. Lydia gasped. The man fell, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The scream of metal striking concrete followed him, bouncing off the walls. "Marco! Marco!" someone shouted. Others rushed to grab the scaffolding. Chaos erupted. Lydia's stomach twisted. She saw Elias freeze for a heartbeat, his eyes wide, the baby formula money still safe in his pocket. Then he ducked behind a pile of crates, moving with practiced stealth. As if the shadows themselves had become his ally, the sirens came next, wailing, urgent. Growing closer with every second, Lydia did not know whether they were police or city inspectors. Either way, the sound sent the workers scattering like startled birds. Shouts rang out, footsteps clanging on metal and concrete. Men disappeared into the night, leaving beams and tools behind. Abandoning everything in a desperate flight, Elias stayed low, crouched in darkness. His chest heaving, she could see the bruises on his arms, the streak of blood on his temple. Yet his hand still rested near the pocket where the money sat. His eyes, alert and calculating, scanned the area for danger. Not for comfort. Not for reward. Only safety. Lydia could barely breathe. Her hands shook as she whispered to herself, he's still here. He survived, and then it hit her like a blow to the chest. All her life, she had offered charity. She had given millions, supported countless causes, saved thousands of children she would never meet. She had walked through gala nights and press conferences with awards pinned to her dress and praise ringing in her ears. She had felt powerful. She had felt good. But none of that, none of it, had mattered. Not really. Here was Elias. A man with nothing, yet everything that mattered. He had refused her money politely, firmly, with quiet dignity. He had chosen pride over ease. And now, with danger threatening him at every moment, he risked his life not for wealth, not for fame, not for recognition but for his child, for his honor, for survival. Lydia's throat tightened. He didn't need me. Not really. She crouched lower, pressing herself against the wall, watching him move like a shadow, hearing his ragged breath, feeling every thump of his heart echo in her own chest. The irony burned. She had thought she was helping him, guiding him, saving him with her wealth. And yet he had been saving himself and his child, doing more with courage and love than all her money could ever achieve. A single tear ran down her cheek. She swallowed hard, trying not to make a sound. The sirens grew distant as the workers scattered into the night, leaving silence behind, broken only by Elias' careful, deliberate movements. And Lydia understood, fully and painfully, that dignity could cost more than money. It could cost life itself, and Elias had paid that cost willingly, silently, and with unshakable resolve. She would never forget this night. Not the fall, not the sirens, not the scattered men, but him, Elias. The father who had nothing but a child, a heartbeat, and courage stronger than gold. Lydia pressed her hand over her mouth, hiding a sob. She had come to help him, she realized, and yet, in the end, it was he who had taught her the true meaning of worth. Lydia's search stretched into days that smelled of smoke and wet stone. Every night, she returned to the streets, her coat now thin and worn, her shoes scuffed, her hands raw from holding so many doors that never led to him. The city seemed to close on her, dark and silent, whispering secrets she was only beginning to understand. She asked every face she could find. Shopkeepers shook their heads. Street vendors shrugged. Other men and women on the pavement muttered, avoided her, or laughed quietly to themselves, as if it were funny that a woman like her, in dresses and diamonds, should chase someone so invisible. Then, one evening, she heard something that made her stop in the middle of a narrow lane. "Did you hear?" a man said to another, leaning against a brick wall, his eyes darting around. "The night workers are back." "What do you mean?" the other replied. "The factories are closed." "Closed? Ha! No one's watching them. They climb scaffolds, carry steel, break the rules, and nobody registers them. Not the city, not the government, not anyone. They say they risk death," the first man said softly, "for cash, and sometimes they disappear." Lydia's heart skipped. She moved closer, though she did not belong here, and listened. "Who goes there?" the first man snapped. Noticing her, just passing, Lydia said, "I'm looking for someone. A man with a child." The men exchanged a glance. The first one spat on the ground. "You won't find him where the light is," he said. "If he works at night, he's hidden. And hidden people, they vanish fast." Lydia nodded, her chest tight. "I need to find him. Please." "Anything, any clue?" The man hesitated, then lowered his voice. "You could try the old factories near the river. The abandoned ones. That's where some of them go. Risking their lives while everyone sleeps." She repeated the words slowly to herself. Risking their lives while everyone sleeps. That night, she walked toward the edge of the city, past streets she didn't recognize, past empty warehouses with rusted doors and broken windows. The wind cut through her coat like knives, and every step echoed off the silent walls. Finally, She arrived at a district that smelled of old metal and oil. Buildings leaned against the night, windows shattered, walls covered in soot. No cars passed. No neon lights shone. Only the shadows moved, long and thin, dancing as if alive. Lydia paused at the edge of the street. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "He could be here. Or gone. And if he's here, it might not be safe." She stepped forward anyway, the sound of her heels almost lost against the emptiness. Each step brought her closer to a place where few dared to go, where men risked their lives for pennies, where the night itself hid the unseen, somewhere in the distance. She thought she heard a faint sound, a shuffle, a whisper, the soft scrape of metal. Her heart pounded. She knew she was close, yet every shadow seemed to hide both promise and danger. And then she stopped, frozen. Ahead, the buildings leaned like giants over empty streets, silent, dark, and waiting. Somewhere in this abandoned district, she thought. He waits, or works, or hides, and if I'm not careful, I may never find him at all. Lydia followed him that night, through streets lit only by flickering lamps and shadows that swayed with the wind. She had learned to move quietly, to avoid the clatter of her heels, but her heart hammered like a drum in her chest. Every alley she turned into seemed darker than the last, every shadow a warning. She had to find him, to speak to him, to understand. Then she saw him. He was crouched near a stack of crates, wiping sweat and blood from his forehead, his chest rising and falling quickly. His eyes flicked toward every sound, every movement. He didn't notice her at first. She stepped closer. Her voice soft but firm, Elias. The name made him freeze. His head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. He pushed himself behind a crate, his hands clutching something in his pocket. "Stay back," he shouted. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I'm not here to hurt you," Lydia said quickly. "It's me." Lydia. His eyes narrowed, suspicion sharpening every line of his face. "Lydia." The rich woman. "What do you want with me here?" "I want to understand," she said, taking a careful step forward. "I've seen you. I saw you tonight. You risked your life, Elias." "Why?" He shook his head, breathing fast. You don't understand. If anyone sees me, if anyone knows where I am," he trailed off, panic making his voice tremble. "I could lose everything. They'll take my child." "They'll who will?" Lydia asked gently, but firmly. "Tell me." He stared at her as if weighing whether to vanish into the darkness. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and broken. I was someone else once. I worked in fashion. Real fashion. I designed, I engineered, I built clothes that people dreamed of wearing. I had a place, a name, respect. Lydia listened, every word piercing her chest. "Then what happened?" "I refused," he said, voice bitter now, yet steady. "I refused to commit fraud, to manipulate numbers, cheat clients, hide poor quality with lies. They blacklisted me. My name, my work, erased. My hands, which once made beauty, now make nothing that matters. And yet they want me to keep living it as if it means nothing." His eyes glistened with pain. "I lost my wife during childbirth. She died giving me this child. And now, this is all I have. She trusted me to protect him. She believed I would keep him safe, and I cannot fail her. Not now." Lydia felt her breath catch. The baby formula in his pocket, the money he kept aside made sense now. Every risk, every bruise, every night spent in the darkness, all for the child he loved. All for the promise he had made to a woman now gone. "You refused my help," Lydia said softly, stepping closer, "but you risked death for your child. You've carried yourself through more than anyone should have to. Elias looked away, ashamed. It's not about pride, it's survival. And dignity. I cannot let anyone see me like this. They would think me weak, a failure. That's all I have left, my dignity. Lydia placed a hand near his arm, careful, not touching him yet. Elias, dignity is not in hiding. It's in what you do. And what you've done. You've shown me the true meaning of it. He swallowed hard. You don't understand, he said, but the panic in his eyes softened. If anyone knew, if they knew I worked this way, everything could be taken. My child, everything. And yet, Lydia said, you chose to live with danger rather than compromise yourself. You chose your child over comfort, truth over wealth. I see that now. Elias looked at her, long and hard. As if trying to judge her sincerity, finally, he nodded once, slowly. You understand? Then, I do, Lydia said. And I want to help, but only if you let me help, without losing yourself, without being exposed. He laughed softly, a short, bitter sound. Help me, you. The one who lives in light while I hide in darkness. Exactly, she said. Maybe it's time the light meets the darkness. Carefully, yes. But it can meet it. And maybe together, we can protect what matters. He studied her a long while, the night pressing on them, the city silent except for distant sirens and the wind through broken windows. Then, after what felt like hours, he finally exhaled. Very well, he said quietly. But know this, Lydia, if this goes wrong, if anyone finds out, I will vanish forever. She nodded. I know, but tonight at least, you don't have to face it alone. And in the quiet of that abandoned alley, two worlds, wealth and struggle, light and shadow stood together, fragile and trembling, yet united by the same truth, love, sacrifice, and courage. The alley grew quiet after his words, as if the night itself leaned closer to listen. A weak streetlight flickered above them, throwing long shadows on the damp ground. Elias stood with his back against the wall, tired beyond measure. His shoulders slumped not from weakness, but from carrying too much for too long. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Dirt filled the lines of his skin. Old cuts crossed new bruises. Slowly, he pushed his hand into his pocket and pulled it back out, his fingers wrapped tightly on a small fold of money. He opened his palm. Lydia recognized the notes at once. It was the money she had offered him. The money he had refused. You kept it, she whispered. Elias nodded. Not for myself, he said quickly. Never for myself. He looked up at her then, really looked at her, and his eyes were full not of anger, not of blame, but of a deep, quiet truth. If I die, he said softly. At least my daughter eats today. The words fell between them like a stone dropped into still water. Lydia felt the air leave her lungs. Her knees weakened, and she took a step back, pressing her hand against the cold wall to steady herself. You don't mean that, she said, shaking her head. You can't mean that. Elias gave a small, tired smile. I do. He closed his fingers on the money again. Every night I go there, I know I might not come back. I know one wrong step, one broken beam, one loud siren, and it's over. He swallowed hard. But hunger doesn't wait for tomorrow. His voice cracked for the first time. My wife died bringing her into this world. I promised her I would not let our child cry from hunger. I promised. Lydia's chest burned. Tears blurred her vision. I had choices, Elias continued. Bad ones, dangerous ones, but they were still choices. And this, he lifted the money slightly, this means she eats. This means she lives another day. Lydia covered her mouth, all her life. She had spoken about sacrifice from stages and interviews. She had praised courage while standing safely under bright lights. She had donated without ever feeling the weight of what it meant to give. Now, standing in a dark alley, she understood. You were willing to die, she whispered, her voice breaking. So your child wouldn't go hungry for one night. Elias nodded. That's what fathers do. Something inside Lydia shattered. She slid down the wall and sank to the ground, her expensive coat pulling down her like something useless and heavy. She pressed both hands to her face, and the tears came fast, hot, uncontrollable. I complain about meetings, she sobbed, about fabric, about profits. I cancel fittings because I'm tired. She laughed weakly through her tears. I've never once wondered if I would survive the night. Elias stepped forward instinctively, then stopped and sure. I had everything, Lydia continued, her voice shaking. Warmth, safety, power. And I called it hard. She looked up at him, eyes red. Raw with truth. I am ashamed, she said. Ashamed that it took your pain to open my eyes. Elias said nothing. He only stood there, holding his pain quietly, as he always had. Lydia wiped her face with trembling hands. You didn't just refuse my money, she said. You showed me how little I understood the world. The streetlight flickered again. In that small broken alley, surrounded by shadows and silence, Lydia Moe felt something she had never felt before, not pride, not power, not control. She felt small. And for the first time in her life, she knew it was exactly what she needed. Lydia sat on the curb of the dark alley, still trembling, still tasting the bitter truth of her own privilege. The night had grown colder, and the wind pushed through her coat. Whispering against her skin, she looked at Elias. His face lit by the faint glow of a distant street lamp, bruised and worn, but still steady. Still defiant. Elias, she said slowly, her voice almost breaking. I can help you. I can give you a job. Work in my fashion house. You'd have safety, regular pay, everything you deserve. Elias froze. He looked down at the ground, then back at her, shaking his head. No, he said firmly. I don't want your charity. I don't want pity wrapped in silk or gold. I make my mistakes, I take my risks, but I do it my way. For my daughter, for me. Not for your handouts, but you shouldn't have to risk your life every night, Lydia pressed, her voice soft but urgent. You're too good, too skilled to work in shadows, carrying steel beams in the dark while your child sleeps hungry. I chose this, Elias said. I chose to protect her dignity and mine. I can't trade that for comfort. Not even for your world. Lydia felt a pang in her chest, a mixture of admiration and helplessness. And then, without warning, the sound came, sirens, sharp and sudden. Cutting through the still night, flashing lights bounced off the walls of the abandoned factory. District, shouts came from the shadows. Police, everyone out. Hands where we can see them, chaos erupted. Men scrambled, steel clanging, scaffolding shaking. Elias's eyes widened. He grabbed the nearest beam for balance, heart hammering. Lydia froze, watching as he moved with a desperate grace. Ducking into shadows. Every muscle tense. Elias, she shouted, come this way. He looked at her for a long second. Panic in his eyes. If they see me, they'll take me, my daughter. They could. I won't let that happen, Lydia said, stepping closer. I can stop them. Trust me. But the authorities were moving fast. Officers ran past her, flashlights sweeping the dark corners. Voices shouting orders. Elias clutched the pocket where he kept the baby formula money, the symbol of his small, sacred victory, and prepared to run. And then Lydia acted. She stepped fully into the light, raising her hands, calling out in a voice that carried through the yard. I am Lydia Moe. He is with me? He is under my protection. The officers paused, and certain whispers ran through the night. The fashion mogul, one of them asked. Really? Yes, Lydia said, keeping her voice steady. He is skilled, talented, and under my supervision. You will not arrest him. Some men nearby exchanged looks. Some officers muttered under their breath. It was scandalous, audacious. The richest woman in the city stepping into the night to protect a homeless man from the law. But Lydia did not care. Not now. Not ever again. Elias stared at her. Disbelief written on his face. You'll risk your reputation for me. I'll risk anything to protect what's right, Lydia said firmly. You taught me about dignity tonight. Now let me return the lesson. He shook his head slowly, still unsure, still trembling. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, she said. Just come with me, and after tonight, you'll never have to choose between danger and feeding your child again. Elias hesitated, eyes darting toward the approaching sirens one last time. Then slowly, he nodded. Together, they walked out of the alley, the night closing behind them. Lydia's hand brushed against his briefly, a silent promise. She could feel the weight of every risk she had just taken, every scandal she might endure, but also the undeniable truth that some lives were worth every consequence. And in that moment, Lydia Moore understood fully that courage was not measured by wealth or fame, but by the sacrifices one made for others, quietly, fiercely, without expectation of reward. Elias, bruised, tired, but alive, followed her, still clutching the money that had once been refused, now a symbol of everything he had fought for and everything Lydia had just risked to protect. Lydia did not announce her visit. She walked through the quiet streets of the city, the early morning sun barely touching the rooftops. Her heels were tucked away, her coat simple, blending in with the ordinary world she had so rarely seen. She carried with her no grand gift. No check, no sparkling jewel, only herself, and the promise she had made in the alley that night, to protect, not to boast, to give respect, not pity. Elias' apartment was modest, tucked into the corner of a narrow lane, the kind of place the city might overlook, and most people would pass without notice. The walls were plain, the furniture minimal. A small crib sat near the window, catching the faint light of morning, and the smell of warm milk and freshly laundered clothes hung gently in the air. Lydia knocked softly, and sure what welcome she would receive. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Elias. Worn from the long night, yet standing straighter than ever. He frowned for a moment. Surprise in his dark eyes. Lydia, he said, cautious, his voice low. What are you doing here? I wanted to see, she said, stepping inside. I wanted to see her. I wanted to see how you are. He hesitated, then nodded slightly, as if allowing her to enter not just his home, but his trust. Lydia's eyes swept across the small apartment. It was simple, functional, filled with care. Every object seemed chosen for necessity and love. A stack of books lay near the crib, a warm blanket draped over a chair, a small collection of toys neatly arranged on a shelf. Then she saw her, the baby. She was sitting in Elias' arms, laughing softly, eyes bright and untroubled. Tiny hands reaching for the sunlight streaming through the window. Her cheeks were full, her skin healthy, her little smile lighting the room in a way no chandelier or glittering award could. Lydia felt her chest tighten. She's beautiful, she whispered. Stepping closer, Elias looked down at the baby, brushing a soft curl from her forehead. She is, he said quietly. She's everything, the baby. Noticed Lydia, and stretched her tiny arms toward her. Lydia knelt gently beside the crib, her heart breaking and mending at the same time. She placed her hand softly over the small, warm one that had reached for her. The baby giggled, a sound so pure it made the world outside the apartment seem distant and trivial. "You've done well, Elias," Lydia said softly, almost to herself. "All of this, all your work, your courage, it's real. You've protected her. You've survived. You've done more than anyone could have asked." Elias glanced at her, eyes steady, careful not to reveal too much of his emotions. "I had to," he said. "She depends on me. I cannot fail. Not her. Not the promise I made to her mother." Lydia swallowed, feeling the lump in her throat. "I thought I understood wealth," she said, voice trembling. "I thought giving millions, attending galas, and signing checks meant I was powerful, that I was helping. But seeing you, seeing her, I realize now, true wealth isn't what you give. It's what you protect." The baby cooed, reaching out for Elias' cheek, and he laughed softly. Tired but happy, Lydia stood quietly,